I am Halli Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, where along with my partner in politics, veteran White House correspondent and Time and Newsweek alum, Matthew Cooper, we slice and dice all things politics, and some days are lawmakers too. On this episode of the Halli Casser-Jayne Show with Matthew Cooper, we tackle it all. Matt Gaetz and Gatesgate, immigration, infrastructure, voter suppression, the Derek Chauvin trial, Iran, and even the other I word, inflation, is in the mix. And that's just where we begin. Hang on to your hats. There's a lot to get to. We begin with Halli and Matt. Here we go. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Halli.
You're chipper today.
Oh, well, I got my second shot, and so I'm feeling pretty invincible right now.
It's exactly the right word. You start to feel invincible. Yeah.
But then you have to wear a mask everywhere anyway, because people will think you're reckless unless you have the mask on. So you kind of want to tell them you're vaccinated, but you can't because you got your mask on. So,
but you had a minor, very, very minor response, right, to the second shot? Isn't that what you told me?
I was very fatigued after it. Just not any some arm pains, but I was just super exhausted. And then I wasn't.
And then you were happy and ecstatic.
I was now.
But here's the weird thing about COVID right now. Can I tell you what I think is very weird about this? It's how complacent everyone has become. And here's why I say this. Because it's rising in so many states, Matt. Hospitals in many states are getting overwhelmed again. And 10,000 new cases the other day in Florida. 10,000 cases is what shut down every state before. And really not a word about it. I'm a little concerned about that. I really, really am. And on top of that, of course, we have the story of Johnson & Johnson, where the vaccine seems to have a rare side effect that didn't come up in the trials where only 20,000 people were used, of course, and now we're into many more than that getting vaccinated. That women between the ages of 18 and 48 are exhibiting some symptoms after 6 to 13 days, and I guess it's mostly blood clots. So they're going to decide today whether that they're going to put a pause on it officially. But it appears that there's been one. So there's still some concerning stuff going on. We can't be completely complacent. And I'm going to put this in the context that they just announced that President Biden, Fauci, and the Obamas are going to appear with celebrities in an NBC roll-up-your-sleeves vaccination special. If we don't get to a certain amount of vaccinations, our vaccinations aren't going to save us. You got any thoughts?
Well, I think it's great they're doing that. It's disappointing that, different people who could reach different audiences aren't. Like Trump, who's got the vaccine, so we know he's not anti-vaccine. He could be doing that, but he's not. So, one more for him. But your basic point, we want to get everyone vaccinated. We don't want to be complacent. We want people wearing masks, for a bit longer here, and it's worrisome. The spike in Michigan is particularly
scary,
unsettling,
to say the least.
Yeah, and how many young people are testing positive? It's interesting.
It almost seems as if this vaccine finds a place to land. If it can't land on seniors, it needs to get into somebody, and so it's going to who is vulnerable. And right now, that's the kids because they haven't been vaccinated, or younger people.
Right, and they're probably less careful, and the thing mutates, so it's a moving target, and we're not out of the woods. But on the other hand, a lot of vaccinations every day. The most vulnerable populations have really gotten vaccinated, so that's all good.
And so the worst records on vaccination, I would like to tell you so far: Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee. I think there's one more. I think the only one that's a Democratic-run state is Louisiana. Interesting. Hello, goodbye. They're going to get what they asked for. They're going to get what they asked for.
Yeah, well, we got to get everyone vaccinated.
So we move on. Oh my gosh. Guess what's next? Guess who's next? Yes.
I don't know. Who?
Matt Gaetz. Or Gaetz.
Oh,
everybody has a different way to say his name. Look, this story, I don't know, Matt. This is kind of getting strange if you ask me. There's a piece I wanted to ask you about. Day in and day out, there were reports about, this guy who was involved, Joel Greenberg, is cooperating. This morning, women come forward who were at these quote unquote parties, and they're talking. This morning it was revealed that back in December they seized Matt Gaetz's iPhone. Here's what I don't get. If this is really so serious, why is he still walking? From December to April. Maybe the story is not as cut and dried as people on the left want to think it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's always possible that A, he didn't do it, or B, they don't have the evidence that he did. And they don't want to charge a sitting member of Congress unless they really have it nailed.
I think it gets to a dangerous...
I don't know. You're asking the right question.
Yeah, I think it gets dangerous. This is what I think. I think it becomes really a dangerous political crazy because yesterday the guy from, who's that dude? I always forget his name, who does the Judicial Watch, who's a wacko.
Oh, that guy, Larry Klayman. Yeah.
One of them, I don't remember which one because there are a bunch of these groups now, came out with a story, saying that CNN was, they filmed a guy, some producer at CNN saying, they were looking for the goods. They weren't reporting the goods or something.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So it's on every cover. Yeah. It's on every right-wing website this morning, and Gaetz is, of course, pushing it on his Twitter feed. I'm just saying that sometimes when these stories start to leak and they're drip, drip, dripping, I don't know who's doing the drip, drip, dripping, but, it's kind of a dangerous thing because it can backfire, just kind of like it did with Trump, where they couldn't nail him at the end, on conspiracy with Russia. So I'm telling everybody, back down.
People who everyone kept saying were guilty, there were no indictments brought. So, we'll see. I mean, Gaetz has not helped himself with ways, bizarre performances and explanations for these things. Now, I love to give gifts to my old girlfriend. I sometimes give hotel rooms to people I like.
But let me put this in context. It's just exactly what Trump did.
My dad's being blackmailed. He's wearing a wire.
Yeah, by the way, his dad was being investigated, his former company, for Medicaid fraud. Still a case that's up in the air. His father's no gem either. Obviously, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I guess the point being that I'm just saying, these kind of stories that leak, even with the Andrew Cuomo thing, you could almost say, they keep throwing it out and dripping, dripping, dripping. Even Trump right now, what's happening at SDNY. Caution to the wind, folks. Caution to the wind. Right. The one story, though, with Matt Gaetz that I think does warrant a follow-up, there was a ghost candidate, so to speak, in the Miami-Dade race. Do you remember that? That it came out that they had run, the Republican Party had run somebody who really wasn't running to siphon votes from the Democrats in Dade County.
Yeah. And
now that
Gaetz was involved in that somehow.
Well, now they're saying there's a guy, I think originally from Gaetz's district. I want to say what his name is. It may be, and I want to get this wrong. Frank Artilis, the former senator from the Miami area, gave more than $44,000 to the fake candidate in the 2020 election. That candidate, Alex Rodriguez, has the same last name as the Jose Javier Rodriguez, and that guy is traced back to Gaetz. So this whole thing with Greenberg and Gaetz and seems to have that. There may be something legitimate, truly legitimate, even separate. Gaetz isn't the core of it, but it's a thing that the Republicans have been playing around with. So I'm just there. I don't think so we're throwing all that out. We're going to move on. George Floyd, Derek Chauvin trial. Gosh, what a week, huh? Listen, Matt, I still can't watch it because I start to shake when I start to watch it. I'm sorry. That's not my job, but I can't help it. It's so disgusting. All of that. And then on top of it, what happened to this young Dante Wright? Tell us about all this. Catch us up.
Well, in the George Floyd trial, I'm sure things will have changed by the time people get around to listening to this, but the prosecution rested its case, and they made a very effective case. They had the chief of police of the city saying this guy acted improperly. Other people said he acted improperly. All the medical people said that, no, this putting your knee on his neck for almost 9 minutes is what killed him, not any drugs in the system. So that, they just undercut all the possible defenses quite effectively. So now it's the defense's turn. And, the first day out was not really strong. I'm just not sure where the defense is going to go. After seeing so many police acquitted in other cases, you don't want to say it's a slam dunk, but gosh, it looks like a pretty overwhelming case against Chauvin. And of course, just to make things worse, there was this awful shooting of this young man in nearby Brooklyn Center, who'd been pulled over for some traffic citation, I forget. But, the guy gets, starts to pull away in his car and get away from the cops. An officer, according to her, reached for her taser, but accidentally picked up her gun and shoots the guy, and he gets killed over a traffic stop. And, it's just awful. And these things are just pure poison for the country, and, very unsettling, as you said.
When he got pulled over, I guess he had his mother on the phone. It just, huh? But why did she pull the taser in the first place?
Yeah, if the guy, as people have been saying, the guy took off, the traffic stop's not like he could go anywhere. They know who he is. They got the plate numbers. There's not a lot of, they could get him later. It's not like they had to.
No, right, exactly. It's like, and this woman.
Pursuit of someone who's shooting.
Oh gosh, I tell you,
there was no need even really to taser him, let alone, do this shooting. And I don't know if the woman's officer is to be believed, whether, she made a mistake or not. I guess sometimes it's happened before, but also they're very different instruments. Tasers, different color, different weight, different shape. It's supposed to be on one particular side. So it's all awful, including, officer who was, pulled over in Virginia late last year and is now suing the small town for his treatment. So really awful.
Here's the sad part about it, because it's clear that there's a problem in the police department. Going back to the 60s, remember when we used to call, well, you didn't, but we did, used to call officers pigs. They were horrible and abrupt. When I was down in Miami, I have to tell you, back in the day, whoa, they were tough. They were tough. And if they saw New York plates on somebody's car, they'd pull you over and they would put you through hoops back in the day. There is a problem with that's clear. It could be bad training. It could be white supremacy, is in there. Who knows? I'm sure there is all the above reasons. But they're not helping themselves either, because all of this is so in the news, so front and center, and they're still acting like lunatics, if you ask me. But there is another side to it, and that's the Democrats. Representative Tlaib comes out yesterday like a crazy woman, defund the police, yada, yada, yada. But I gotta say, they got on it in a second. Sheila Jackson Lee got out there on all the talk shows and said, no, wait a minute, we're all emotional about this. That's an overreaction. But it doesn't help. It just doesn't help. It's a theme in the Democratic Party of this far left group, just causing more trouble than they need to cause. Barack and Michelle Obama responded also. They made a statement, and so did Vice President Harris, of course. But that left wing of the Democratic Party, I'm telling you, Matt, it ain't any better than the right wing. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes. I'm worried.
Well, yeah, defund the police was really bad for Democrats in 2020. Even if lots of people in the party, the vast majority of the party, disavows that, that's the message that kind of gets out there to a lot of people. And, it's bad messaging and it's bad policy. And you gotta, we're going to have police and you're going to have to fund them, and you either do it, the right way or the wrong way. And, they, to the degree that, the defund people meant, get them out of the business doing traffic or truancy and things like that. That was fine. But to say defund them, well, when people hear that everywhere, they think that's crazy talk.
Well, it is crazy talk.
And it is crazy talk.
It is crazy talk. And, it shouldn't be coming from the left, but it is. And that's worrisome. And let's move into the Biden presidency where it is right now. And we'll see how, this starts to get a little nuts. All right. First of all, the big thing this week, I think, is that he's announcing today that he's withdrawing all American troops from Afghanistan by September 11th. The right went bonkers. It's an admission the U.S., lost the longest war. Nobody's done well in Afghanistan, needless to say. It is concerning whether you wind up creating what was the other group that rose when Obama pulled out of Iraq. But I don't know. We keep staying there for what? So yeah, this is a political football. I thought it was quite courageous of Biden to say, "I'm done. We're done. We're not going to do it." What do you think?
I don't know if it's courageous. You could argue the opposite, that it's pretty popular.
It's what? I didn't hear you. Wait, go back.
You could argue it's pretty popular, you're pulling out. I mean, it's what Trump promised it to do. That's what Obama promised it to do. So it's, something one president was going to do eventually. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons to be concerned. The Taliban, it seems like Taliban's going to come back into power, at least power sharing, but maybe the whole thing, that's going to be, awful for people there, especially women. And, that's terrible. I don't think it's going to become a haven for terrorism in quite the way it was. But if that happened, oof. I don't know. There's something a little pat about pulling at the exact date, 20 years after 9/11. It's a little too kind of, staged to do it on that day. And,
well, I'll agree with that. I thought that was silly.
Yeah. And you can leave troops in a place like Germany or South Korea for a long time, Japan. And if it's kind of going okay, people aren't that upset about it. The problem is these troops have been in there, they haven't really resolved that. There's no peace settlement, It's not like leaving troops in Japan or Germany. I mean, there's no peace settlement in the Koreas either, but at least it's kind of, I wouldn't say stable, but, Americans aren't getting killed on the ground. If I hadn't answered Afghanistan, that'd be real. I think,
Well, no, I hear you. I think the reason that I said courageous is because I frankly think it will be an ongoing problem. And somebody had to do it because, what's the point of being there at this point, at the moment? You can always send troops back. So it was just like, let's take this one off the table. Biden's somewhat easy to read, by the way. He just wants to keep things smooth. However he can keep things smooth, that's the choice that he's going to make. If he thinks it's going to be too volatile or too, insane, he's not going there. But here's an opening. Just let this one go for now. We've got bigger fish to fry. The others wouldn't do that. So that's why I said courageous. Where it's not courageous is there's still no word from him on Navalny, and that ticks me off.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part.
I said there's still nothing from Biden on Navalny.
Oh, Navalny.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
Navalny, and that
the Russian.
And
the Russian
this one's very much on my mind. This is a horrid story that's going on there, and the United States is better than this to let this kind of human rights abuse on such a grand, in your face way go on and not mention and not take a stand on it. Now, Biden invited Putin to a summit somewhere in a third country. But I don't know. I think this is just such a slap in the, considering this poor guy. Okay, there's that, but it's also Putin going, screw the West. I guess you got nothing on that.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. I don't have strong feelings about it. I mean, I guess
I do.
Ratchet up. They could ratchet up some sanctions or.
More than that. It needs more than that. It needs more than that. It needs a real diplomatic, go to the UN.
Well,
I can go to the UN. Go to the UN. Get a bunch of countries together, go to the UN and say, all right, this, he's poisoning people left and right in other countries. It's our business. And then he's, coercing them back to his country, and he's putting them in horrible places and slowly killing them. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. I'm sorry to be so crazy on this one. Yeah. It's watching the guy die is so bad. Well, you got to have
support for that. I don't know if they,
the Western countries
get anything through the Security Council. I mean, I don't know what you could get.
Well, just some kind of a statement, Human Rights Commission, somebody say something somewhere. We're not going to solve it today. Let's move forward. I want to also talk about how crazy the Republicans are getting because Biden is so untouchable. It's delicious to watch. I got to tell you. Oh boy, they are freaking out. Whatever they throw, it gets them nowhere. Reagan was the Teflon King. We talked a little bit about this last week, but I just want to continue it because it's just really funny. And now there are these things called Biden Republicans. Have you seen any stories about that?
Yeah, I've heard the term.
Yeah, so it's becoming a thing. It's becoming a thing. And that's a successful presidency, even if it's only, 100 days in, if it's that. But let me tell you how powerful I think that Biden is. A story broke this morning, and this is close to my heart. You'll see why. The headline was, Inside the Surprisingly Close Manchin-Biden Relationship. Bylines, Amy Parnes and Alexander Bolton posted on The Hill.
Right.
Source. You ready for the source?
Yeah, I'm ready for the source.
Joe Manchin. He must be having trouble with his poll numbers because he's getting slammed everywhere by Democrats for his, obstinacy on infrastructure
right.
and on the, what's it called? So I just thought that was so funny. He planted his own story, his team. So that's a good thing. He doesn't have the power, Matt, because he has to have weird poll numbers in West Virginia even for him to have poll to plant that, to call them in and say, let's talk to these reporters. That's your beat. Talk to me about that. Does that ring true to you?
Well, I'm sure he's very mindful of, his polls at home. I mean, he just won last year, right? So he's not
vulnerable.
He's not vulnerable. The world's going to look different in 2026, so it's not really a re-election that he's worried about. Look, I'll take him at his word that he wants to try to have more bipartisanship, and he thinks he can, it'll be better for the country and for the world if they get a deal that has some Republicans in it. And I think he does like the president, and knows him, and has no animus towards him. So, I think he's trying to juggle a lot of things. I think the real question is, what happens if he makes this run at bipartisanship and they just don't have any or not enough Republicans going along with a pretty big infrastructure package? Is he going to do what he did on the first CARES Act and other things and just vote on party lines and vote for this reconciliation that makes it easier to pass? Or is he going to just balk at the whole thing? I think that's still the outstanding question about him.
But I think the fact that he did this interview tells you that he's gonna, at the end, stick with the Dems after he's given the Republicans a chance to come on board. That's my take on it.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good bet.
Yeah,
I think it's a good bet. I guess I just wouldn't say he's doing that out of fear.
Well, I don't know if it's fear. I think it's politics. I didn't mean to. Right. Well, I didn't mean to say he's doing it out of fear. I'm just saying, he's a politician. He's looking at what he's got. Yeah. And he's playing it for what he's got. No, I don't think it's fear. But anyway, it's interesting. We moved to voter suppression.
Absolutely.
Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, trying to end Major League Baseball's antitrust exemption because of what they did by moving the, what's it called?
Right.
Help me.
Over the Georgia law and the All-Star.
Right. So I think that's really interesting. I also think that today you got a bunch of corporations saying, guess what? We aren't going to be giving donations to anybody. You should stop with this crazy trying to suppress rights to vote.
Right.
the Republicans now moving to get those blue-collar workers and become the party of the blue-collar worker, which to me is a joke. And we have, the opposite now, corporation going to the Dem. Boy, we really are changing parties. It's like, I don't recognize either one at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the corporations have a foot in both camps, right? I mean, they still want lower taxes, kind of regulatory stability, and but now they also, don't want to get on the wrong side of these social issues. And, we saw, several years ago how many corporations, got on the side of same-sex marriage and even filed briefs at the Supreme Court in favor of it. So, it's, corporations kind of want it both ways. And I don't know, Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, it's all performance, these guys. I mean,
well, it's not performance. Did you see the haul that Ted Cruz came in with for the first quarter? Like $5 million?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not saying they're not getting rewarded, but they're crazy fans out there. These people write checks for anything.
I have to tell you something. Can I just interrupt?
Their last dime with Donald Trump.
Ted Cruz is the most odious human being walking the face of the earth. There is just nothing warm and fuzzy or anything. He's just deplorable as a human being. Who is giving him $5 million? If he was my next door neighbor, I'd move. Do you know what I'm saying? He's just an awful human being. I can't understand humanity. I just can't. We're not going to solve that one, obviously, this week. But let's move on real quick because I do have a bunch of other stuff we wanted to go.
Yeah, sure.
Second half hour, folks, please stay tuned because a friend of mine, Warren Binford, this wonderful woman of Project Amplify, is on. They've got a new book out, Project Amplify, called Hear My Voice. They got in there. They got 16 unbelievable artists to do the artwork for what is ostensibly a children's book. It's not. It's for children and adults. Half of it in Spanish meets half of it in English. And it's the testimonies of children detained at the border. It's gut-wrenching. It's eye-opening. I did the interview with Warren yesterday. Please stick around and listen to this and pass this one along. It's very important. It really gives you answers to questions because a lot of you, email me and message me on the social media asking me my opinions on this because of my background of it. We put it all together and we really explain it and where we're going on that. That said, Iran's nuclear facility was hit by guess who? You think? Israel?
Yeah. Looks that way.
I love it. They want to get themselves back in Biden into this whole thing with the Iran deal. I'm sorry. I didn't agree with it in the first place. I don't agree with the second. The Iranians are crazy people in the leadership and not the people. The people are wonderful, the leadership. And I just think, Israel's got this one right. The Democrats just are off. You got any thoughts on it?
Well, I think everyone's agreed, the United States and Israel and others, especially the Gulf states, they don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, and everybody wants that. I think the question is what's the best way to prevent it. I don't know if these, and I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I don't know if these kind of strikes, these actions by Israel or the computer viruses and all that is going to be enough to stop them. I still think there's a pretty persuasive case that you want an enforceable agreement with lots of, verification and guarantees is still the best way to do it. And I don't know if they can get there or if they can do that, but I think that's kind of what you want more than just relying on these things, because these piecemeal things, I'm not sure they get you what you need.
Well, if you can't, if you blow their centrifuges and they can't create, I think it does a damn good job. I don't think the paper any deal is based on is going to hold up with these people. It has to be something much, sanctions, nail them to the ground. I mean, the poor people there, but maybe that's what causes the final upheaval that they almost had it. till Obama backed off. It's a mess over there. But I just don't think trying to reach a deal with them written on paper does anything but forestall, the inevitable, as you say, anyway. But it's something to talk about. NRA, 64% of registered voters said in Morning Consult political tracking poll that they are all for control restrictions. I think that's powerful. That includes Republicans. So there's that. We're into lightning now, so I'm going to talk fast, jump in. Still nothing on the insurrectionists in Congress. I don't get it. You get it? I don't get it.
No investigation, you said?
None. Nothing on the insurrectionists.
Yeah, I mean, just some committee stuff, but not a lot.
Not enough. Because these guys are using what they did for their power, i.e. $5 million to Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley. This is not a good thing. It's becoming a cause. You need to nip it in the bud, Congress, now. Michael Cohen spoke to New York prosecutors for the 9th time this week. That's another story. Nothing. What do we have to wait for?
Yeah.
The next administration? I can't believe that they've...
Yeah, I guess these guys are just, want to be super cautious that they don't, try to prosecute a former president of the United States without a pretty strong sense that they can win. And I guess they're still trying to get there.
Listen, Trump just went against them again in court, saying that they're trying to, they don't have a right to release his tax returns to Congress because he's no longer the president of the United States. So he's in there fighting like crazy, and they're just letting time wear on. I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that solves the problem. So that's what I have to say to that. Bernie, what's his name? Ponzi guy?
Yeah, Madoff. Bernie Madoff died.
82 years old. Boy, what a debacle that was. I know so many people, friends of my parents, who were just annihilated in that scheme. Sad. Princess Philip's going to be buried on Saturday.
Yeah.
Grandson Harry, estranged grandson, flew home, left the wife back in the USA. First story was that she was pregnant and too far into her pregnancy. Well, gosh, I think she's like 7 months pregnant, if that. Everybody I know that was it. However, yesterday she couldn't keep herself silent. She came out with the, I decided not to go on my own. It wasn't the doctors because I didn't want to be the center of attention. Oh my God. Sky News, BBC, everybody went nuts. Can't she keep her big mouth shut? This girl has a problem. Let me see where else I am. I just want to check real quick to see if there's anything that, Tucker Carlson's going to be a story. Anti-Defamation League is going after him. Block and Murdoch dismissed their claims on this replacement conspiracy theory. And if you guys don't know what that is, it holds that people of color are replacing white people in the West, enabled by Jews and progressive politicians, which is why the Anti-Defamation League asked that he be fired. And they just laughed at him at Fox. I don't think this is over. He went a bridge too far. You got anything on that? This Tucker Carlson's out of control.
I agree. I mean, I think it's going to stay ratcheted up, but I think he's a long way from getting censured by his bosses, let alone fired.
No, I agree, but I think that nobody should stop it. They should keep on hammering on him because this is a bridge too far. It really is. If they're going to use the word news, then they got to stop.
I don't know why they do. Yeah, I don't know why they do.
You think? Nikki Haley changed her tune again. She's going to vote for Trump this woman's nuts. That's all.
Well, she's trying to be strategic. She's trying to have it, both ways.
She's on her 7th incarnation of she will or she won't. She will or she won't. She's finished.
Yeah, I think the one thing, people don't want is that much Vaseline.
In any leader.
You can do some Vaseline, but you can't do that much.
Yeah. Former Virginia.
It's hard. Things can change a lot and will change a lot over the next 3 years, but I find it hard to see her being the. Yeah, no,
I think she blew it. She blew it. So she's now in the, the goofy Republican side of the aisle. Terry McAuliffe, former Virginia governor, he's holding a wide lead in the Virginia gubernatorial primary. Boy, back in the day when he was Clinton's, number one spokesperson, who would have thought he would have wound up being so successful as a politician? God bless.
Yeah, I think I think he's very much a kind of old school politician, and he likes to make deals. He's super gregarious. He's of course a huge fundraiser, as you alluded to, and was a good Commerce Secretary. Had a good success as his first term as governor. So I think he's got an excellent chance of winning.
I do too.
It's the only state where governors are limited. Can't run for 2 terms consecutively, so that's why he's coming back after an absence, and we'll see if the state buys it. But right now, I tend to think they will.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. Betty McCollum, Democrat, Minnesota. Here we go. Remember what I said? Left wing. She's expected to introduce legislation to exercise increased oversight of assistance to Israel.
You don't think that's just a reasonable attention to government spending? I take it you're saying more sinister motives.
Well, let me put it this way: this is the quote is that I got is expected to introduce legislation to exercise increased oversight of American assistance to Israel as part of efforts to ensure no U.S. tax dollars contribute to alleged civil and human rights abuses against Palestinians by Israel. They're off the wall. Don't go to Minnesota.
Well, I think a lot of people say, well, that doesn't sound bad. Why is that bad? People are going to say that. So what's your answer?
People would be wrong. It's very clear where she's coming from. She's got a huge Muslim population in her district. Hello.
Right. So, okay, but you're saying
it's a Democratic Party problem.
For listeners who don't already agree with you, why is that a bad?
Because it is singling out Israel. It is a backhanded anti-Israel move. Israel is no different than any other country. It has a Palestinian population that's a problem. You give them money, they squander it, they use it to kill Jews. Hello. You can't ignore the facts on the ground. And it's not that they don't want to help these people. It's you got to be careful who you give the money to because it winds up in people's, fancy silk suits rather than actually helping the Palestinians. So we don't have a lot of time to get on it. We'll get back to it. I'm going to finish on this, Matt. Keep your eye on this one, okay? Inflation.
I'm eyeing it. What is it?
Inflation. The cost of housing and food are through the roof. And there have been reports, you got to go into the weeds to find them, but the Biden administration has its eye on inflation. I think inflation might be an issue coming up.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, you and I are, as young as we seem, we're old enough to remember inflation in the 1970s. It's bad. Unemployment doesn't screw everybody. Inflation screws everyone. And, it's bad when you have a lot of persistent high inflation. It just takes all your money away, and it's really bad. This so far, the Fed Trump's appointed Federal Reserve Chairman has been pretty chill about this. So was Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, and we'll see if their calm is right. I don't know.
Do you feel it? I certainly feel it. Prices on food have doubled in the last 6 months.
Well, we're
down here
seeing some spikes, and some of that's, the question is whether some of that's kind of temporary and unique to the pandemic, supply chain, other things, or
price of gas, by the way, up also. Almost.
Well, because more people are driving.
Yeah, well,
down so much. The question is it going to be sustained? Like airline prices up, right? Because people hadn't been flying, the prices went super low. The question is all this stuff going to be sustained? I have no doubt this is going to be short term. The question is the long term, and I don't know the answer. You may be right.
Well, keep your eye on it because my point is there is nothing that destroys a presidency more than high inflation. And particularly when it's always seemed to be under Democrats. Oh, my God, Jimmy Carter, poor Jimmy.
Well, don't forget Ford. It's whip inflation now.
Well,
they tried to talk it down.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my feelings on Ford. Was he really president? Yeah.
I agree.
It's a concern. Anyway, that's where we leave you unless you have something that we didn't hit that you wanted to hit.
No, just even now you make me want to spend my money now before it's worthless. So I'm just
Go
gonna
buy food
something.
and put it in the freezer, honey.
Buy something before it's worth less.
Do you drive?
Right.
Do you have a car? I never asked you that. I don't know. You live in the city. Are you?
Yeah, I've had them. I haven't had them. Do a lot of Uber, things like that.
Yeah, that's what I figured because you were in town. The only reason I say is because that's the other killer. I mean, the price of gas has skyrocketed, but it always does under Democrats. So, hello. Oh, boy. All right, sweetie, that's it. Adios,
All right.
amiga. Until next week.
All right, next week. See ya.
Let me introduce you to Warren Binford. She, yes, she, is a lawyer and an international children's rights scholar. Most importantly, she is one of only a handful of private citizens selected to inspect border facilities where migrant children are detained. Warren co-founded Project Amplify in 2019 to allow the voices of migrant children to be heard. And now, Project Amplify is helping to tell the heartbreaking experiences of the children in the new book, Hear My Voice, the testimonies of children detained at the southern border of the United States. Over 300,000 children were detained at the U.S.-Mexican border in 2019, with over 40% of those children held longer than the legally mandated 72-hour limit. While the media has covered the appalling conditions these children face, including separation from their families and unsanitary facilities, the stories of the individual children have gone largely untold. Hear My Voice amplifies the voices of real children detained on the border using children's actual words, featuring the brilliant art of 17 Mexican and Mexican-American artists. Let's talk with Warren Binford. Hi, Warren.
Hi, Halli. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for this book. This is just so powerful. It's beautifully rendered. The artwork is just spectacular. The children's voices are gut-wrenching. It needs to be on every single coffee table in America. That's what I have to say to begin with. But I want you to help me out here. I'm going to ask you to clarify some stuff because I think Americans really don't know what the heck this is really all about. It's like I think the media has jumped ahead of the game. Help me make this real for the listener. Why are these migrants seeking asylum? What's happening in their countries?
Yeah, so the stories that we hear from a lot of these children and the families is that basically, a vacuum of power has been created in many of the Central American countries. And if you look at the history of relations between the U.S. and Central America, you know that we have actively exploited these countries. American corporations have been involved there. The United Fruit Company, which is currently in Chiquita, was there in the late 1800s, early 1900s, engaged in extractive industries and exploiting laborers and people, and then the U.S. government got involved to try and protect our economic interests, and we prevented strong, vibrant democratic governments from being developed. And what ended up happening is that power vacuum has been filled with criminal cartels and gangs who are largely operating to satisfy, some of the darker sides of culture and impulse, such as, our love of guns and arms and drugs, unfortunately, and that these cartels and gangs are doing things like trying to force some of these girl children into sex slavery and force the boys into illegal activities. And, we hear just the most horrific stories from some of the families about older siblings who, were gang raped and, their limbs cut off because they wouldn't, be a willing sex slave to the gang. And so they literally would gang rape her and kill her. And these are the really atrocious conditions that these children and families are trying to escape from. So we really need to do a couple of things here. Is deal with the root problems, which is the fact that we've created this power vacuum in countries and try and support their, political development into thriving democratic societies. And then we also need to develop border management policies and practices that respond to the changing demographics at the border, which is more children and families than we've seen historically. It's not higher numbers. It's changing demographics, and that's something that our laws and our policies have just not caught up with.
I was reporting for ABC, Salvador, Nicaragua, and Guatemala, and the whole triangle. Back in the 80s, I have to tell you, it's only gotten worse, not better. And that's the nightmare. That's the sad part. I want you to also talk about briefly the journey and what a nightmare the journey is for people, whether they go by themselves, they go through coyotes, however the hell they get themselves across the border. You don't do this because of no reason. Talk to me, the nightmare. bringing your children across?
Well, there's one story that comes to mind, which is a little boy. He was about 14, and he was a straight-A student, wanted to stay in school. The gang kept pressuring him and his best friend to drop out of school and join the gang, participate in these criminal activities, and they kept saying no, and they kept trying to stay away from the gang. And the gang said, if you don't do what we tell you to do, we'll kill you. And these boys were really scared, and so one day they were walking home from school, and the gang members started to chase them with a machete, and literally this little boy watched in horror as his best friend was beheaded in front of him, and he kept running and running, and he did not look back. He literally, walked and hitchhiked, and jumped on a train, La Bestia, that brought him all the way to the U.S. border. And, these kids sometimes have to cross the Rio Grande River. They sometimes have to, cross through the deserts for, hours and sometimes days with little to no access to water. They sometimes have coyotes who try and get them across safely. 2/3 of females who follow that migration road, they are sexually assaulted along. We've talked to people who have been kidnapped and locked up in, houses, sexually abused. And, there have been stories about, families who were contacted and said, if you don't send us $1,000, we're going to kill your daughter or your granddaughter. It's just really horrific conditions that bring of these children and families to the United States. And it's understandable why they're trying to leave and get to their family members here in America.
So they get here and they're treated like they're criminals. In fact, that's exactly how they even get into the facilities, is similar to a felon going to penitentiary for 20 years. I mean, and they're children. But you've been in the facility, so I want you to just explain a little bit about what is going on in these places. The conditions are just bizarre.
Yeah, no, it's absolute madness. I mean, one of the facilities that I inspected was the Walmart, in eastern Texas, and it was insane. It was like the children were made to, line up in single file lines and then march past this giant mural of President Trump 6 times a day in uniforms. And, there was fake money that was like taped to the wall with pictures not of George Washington, but of the, president of the nonprofit that was running the facility, Father Juan, and it was like, what is this place? The children were almost never let outside. They were almost never allowed to talk to their parents, and they were almost always hungry. You go into the Clint Border Patrol facility, for example, which is where we were in June 29, where we discovered the 350 kids in the warehouse and the loading dock and the tents out in the desert and the overcrowded jail cells. And it's like, these kids were filthy. They smelled bad. They were crying. They wanted to shower. They wanted soap. They wanted to brush their teeth. They were holding unrelated children in their arms. There were toddlers who were like urinating, on the conference room seats because nobody had put diapers on them. Nobody was caring for them. It's just completely out of control. And the Border Patrol agents are pulling me aside in the hallway saying, you've got to get these children out here. I'm a dad. I'm a mom. Like, these children do not belong here. We don't have the ability to take care of them. We don't have the tools to take care of them. They need to be with their families. And that's exactly what needs to start to happen at the U.S. border, is that, there needs to be a determination of who the child is. They need to be received child-appropriate place for, first and foremost, where they're given food, they're given water, they're, cared for by a child care worker, pediatrician at them, et cetera. So receive them, reception, identify who they are, identification. And then once you've been able to identify them, get them to their family or other loved ones in the United States. And 89% of these children have families or other loved ones in the United States who can take care of these children, and that's really where they belong while they present their legal claims to remain. And if they have a legal basis to remain, we need to integrate them into U.S. society, and if they don't have a legal basis, then we need to return them quickly to their families in their home country.
Humanely. This is the United States of America. Emma Lazarus must be crying in her grave. I ask you this separation policy. I've spoken to I've had other people on the show. I've had a mother on the show whose kid was, wrenched from her and sent across the country, for Christ's sakes, to be housed until her case was heard. What is this? What's the point?
The point really was cruelty. I mean, if you look at the stated policies of Stephen Miller, Trump White House. There is a memo that was leaked to Senator Jeff Merkley that I was provided that talks about if we make it hurtful enough, if we treat the children badly enough, they will stop coming. And the fact is that the research around migration suggests that if you introduce harsh immigration policies, it can lead to an increase in migration rather than a decrease because it creates a sense of urgency on the part of people who are considering migrating. And in fact, that's exactly what we saw after the Trump administration started to introduce these really harsh immigration policies. Rather than have the children stop coming and families stop coming, more came. You look at the numbers in 2019 and we saw that rise that you could predict from the research. And it's also part of the crisis that we're seeing now, that the Trump administration sent over 60, almost 70,000 children and families to Mexico, even though they weren't from Mexico. They didn't have jobs there. They didn't have shelter there. And they sent them there under the Remain in Mexico policy and said, you need to stay there while your cases are being heard. And in fact, that's that bottleneck that we're now. So it's really a tragedy because, there is some of the, some of the increase that we're witnessing now is a result of the climate crisis effects that, happened last fall in Guatemala, in the Northern Triangle, the hurricane, et cetera. But part of it is this backlog from the previous administration and not processing the kids in an orderly way as they were arriving. And now we don't have the capacity to take care of them, which makes it even more urgent to get them out of government care and to their families, because kids don't belong in convention centers. They belong in homes with loved ones.
Of course. They're so traumatized. I don't think people understand the extent to which these kids are traumatized in their native country, traumatized by the, horrible way of getting here, and then traumatized by the United States government. You talk about mutism and selective mutism. Kids being sick, kids have died in facility. Talk to me about the trauma. Let's make this real. We have learned so much about childhood trauma in recent decades, and it really needs to drive our child-centered policies, that we need to recognize that when we treat children in these ways, it will not just affect them and their ability to function, not just during, short term as children, but going into their adulthood, and that this can affect them not just in psychological ways, but actual physical ways, that we're starting to understand the way that childhood trauma negatively affect the developing brain. We are also starting to understand that it can affect your genetic expression. One of the ways that we see is it can disrupt your ability to regulate your response to stress, your stress response. And some of the latest research around childhood trauma suggests that this can become intergenerational. So some of the research around Holocaust survivors suggests that, the disruption of, genetic expression, stress response can be passed on not just to your children, but to your grandchildren as well. And so when we traumatize children as severely as we currently, at the southern border of the United States, we're actually potentially creating both lifelong harm and possibly even intergenerational survivors of that trauma. Like everything else in this country, this has become a political football. I don't know why it's not a humanitarian football. It's a political football. The term now being used by the press is crisis. I don't know that anything's different today than it was yesterday other than the count. Where are you on this? Are you having better hopes for the Biden administration doing something? I mean, Harris, hasn't even gone down since she took on the job to fix this situation. What are your thoughts there?
Well, my thoughts are, first of all, that although it's true that we're witnessing a crisis, that it's not a crisis in numbers. That this is, we are witnessing lower levels of immigration than over the last several decades. But what is the crisis is the fact that we have changing demographics and that we have not changed the policies and practices at the border to respond to those changing demographics. So this is basically a human-made crisis. And the fact is that we are intelligent, capable people. We are a, wealthy and powerful country that is innovative, and, we can solve this problem. And one of the ways that we can solve this problem is simply recognizing that immigration has changed and that we need to change our policies and practices, our border management, to respond to these. So, I do think that talking with representatives of the Biden administration and those who are working with them more directly, I am hearing that they want to change border management in such a way that the children at the border are no longer being abused and neglected, and that they are trying to develop more child-centered policies and get the children to their family more quickly. And so that gives me hope. We are offering to work with the Biden administration to, develop some model programs so that children who have family in the United States are placed near their families while their legal claims, while the families are being vetted, and that they then would be able to live with their families while their legal claims in the United States are being heard. And we're hopeful that the Biden administration will work with us in trying to develop this model program.
Here's another thing. The images that are being snuck out, because that's what's happening, are just so alarming. What's with this Mylar? What's with these bodies on top of each other? Girls and boys in the same facility, no bathrooms, you talk about what's in the book, one of the stories about how you go to the bathroom. The dignity has just been stripped from these poor kids.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And, it's interesting because after we went public about what we discovered in Clint, there were a number of people who were demoted or even had to resign. And we were told about changes that were going to be made to facilities, and they were going to make sure that every child had, a place to sleep so that they weren't on the floor, and that there would be, wool blankets that were brought in, so that children weren't sleeping with, these Mylar blankets that do not sufficient with them at all. And then, here are the Mylar blankets again. People, we've gone through this. It's not that hard to give a child a blanket. It's not that hard to give a child a pillow. It's not that hard to give a child an apple, or an orange or something, healthy to eat. And yet, we seem to be cycling through the same negligent and sometimes abusive practices that we've been documenting since 1995. And I really, I'm struggling to understand why administration after administration is failing to develop child-centered policies.
When you come up with the answer, let me know. I have to ask you about you. How is it for you to go into a facility, to be working on this project for as long as you have, to be putting this together and to talking, reading, seeing, experiencing? You must be traumatized.
I try to not keep any of the focus on me, because this is really about the children. That, I'm very fortunate. I'm an adult. I'm a U.S. citizen. I have a loving and stable family, a loving and stable marriage, a loving and stable job. I will be fine. And, God, the universe, however you want to see it, has given me the strength, the opportunity to go in, meet with these children, and to be gifted with their stories. They're not my stories. They're the children's stories. And I feel like I have been given, that strength and the resilience to be a vessel for them, so that I can turn around, get on your show, and tell them what's going on to help amplify the children's voices, and get their stories out there, because I believe that the American people, if they know what's going on, will call for change. And that's what I'm hoping will come from this book, is that it truly will change the course of history, not because of me or anybody else, or any secondary trauma we might experience, but because these children's voices are so powerful and their stories are so compelling, that I really do believe that we change the course of history if we just listen to the children.
They want, they wish, they hope. They're human. They're children. They could be our own children. It just frosts me. That's an understatement. I don't think that's what people see, which is why I love this book, because it's a book that looks like it's a children's book. It is the most powerful adult book ever. Tell us what people can do. Picking up the book, the royalties go to from Hear My Voice will go to benefit the children in migration. But what else can people do?
Well, first and foremost, people do need to buy this book, that they need to buy 10 copies of this book, that they need to recognize that there are certain shared values that can unite us as a country, and one of them is our love of children, and that we need to focus on, that love of children in guiding policies that respect children and treat them with dignity and don't cause them lifelong harm because of trauma that they're subjected to at the hands of our government, paid for with our taxpayer dollars. They need to share this book with their friends, community members, send a copy to their member of Congress, send a copy to the White House, send a copy to Mar-a-Lago, get the children's voices into the right hands so that they can inform government policy. We also need to ensure that we recognize the power that we have as members of a democratic society to decide who is going to lead us and who's going to, develop laws and policies that will affect these children and elect those people into office. Once they're elected into office, or even if it's not the person that we choose, we need to make sure that we communicate with our representatives and tell them that we care about how children are treated and that we don't want hundreds of dollars a day being spent to abuse children, that these children need to go to their family or other loved ones as quickly as possible and be treated humanely meanwhile. And then we also need to make sure that we support those organizations that are on the front lines of this issue, trying to both serve the children on a day-to-day basis as their pediatricians, as their lawyers, as, the social workers who are trying to connect them with their families, and try and make sure that the children along the way encounter compassionate people that will keep their beliefs, not just in the United States, but in humanity alive during the time that they're transitioning to the United States.
Thank you, Warren. I've been speaking with Warren Binford. Her book is Hear My Voice, The Testimonies of Children Detained at the Southern Border of the United States. All royalties from the sale of the book go to Project Amplify. Please purchase Hear My Voice and help these migrant children in migration. For more information on Project Amplify and to order your copy of the book, visit project-amplify.org. Thank you for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of Resec LLC. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, and is available at hallicasserjayne.com and on all your favorite apps. Be sure to visit us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and follow me on Twitter at The Halli CJ Show. Until next time, this is Halli Casser-Jayne.